Welcome back to the program. Of course, one of my most popular and requested guests. We're back with Scott Bennett, retired Army psychological operations specialist, and I'm vamping, I admit it. There we go, ready to go. How are you, Scott?
I'm doing good, Jason. It's good to be with you.
Good to be with you, and that is a true statement. Anytime you're on, Scott, there's a lot of people who say, I love this guy, and then there's a lot of people who say, I hate this guy, but they're still watching. So, I mean, you know, one of the things I like about you, Scott, is that you don't pull punches. You share your opinions, your insights, your views with the audience, even if they are controversial as they may be. And that's fine. That's the purpose of what we're doing here. You're an expert. And when you share your opinion, people can apply that how they choose. Now, we're going to be talking about Robert Mueller and his, I don't really have a way to describe it other than bizarre, that press conference from yesterday. He didn't really tell us any. He basically said RTFM. And for people who don't know what that means, they can Google it. But he said the report stands on its own. So then the question becomes, why the hell did he have that press conference?
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to try and speak the truth as best I know it, and I hope it empowers people with a different perspective, or confirms theirs, or helps people change out of ignorance. That's why we do these shows, Jason, is just to articulate truth as best we can in our humble experience, but that's all that matters, because lies have gotten us down a road of destroying our country, destroying our citizens, destroying our economy, destroying our health. The lies of, I mean, you can take it to all sorts of levels. The lies of vaccines and the madness of some of these vaccines, that now you see some of the data coming out, it's related to all sorts of brain dysfunction, whether it's autism or other things. There's just something wrong there. There are lies in there you can smell. And the lies of 9/11.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, Scott, but I want to say one thing, because it's important that we don't get lumped in with, giving people fuel to throw this anti-vax thing at us.
Right,
it's not the concept of vaccination that we disagree with. It's the manipulation that really wealthy pharmaceutical companies are able to exert over politicians by lobbying and funding campaigns and funding things in clandestine ways through super PACs that get laws manipulated such that things like vaccines can be reclassified as biological instead of pharmaceutical, and be subjected to less testing and become this windfall industry with basically no oversight. And then if somebody like you or I comes out here and says, hey, wait a minute, there's a problem, we get suppressed and shut down and made to look crazy or wrong or like we're lying. And a big component of that, Scott, is social engineering. It's a broad term. And I feel like Robert Mueller was engaging in social engineering yesterday. And I want our audience to really take note of this, because we all have experience interacting with other people, and we know what we think personally is a quote unquote normal way for someone to act and an abnormal way for someone to act. Usually if somebody in the government at the level of Robert Mueller calls a press conference, it's because they have some big revelation to give us, some important piece of information that must get out to the press broadly. But Mueller didn't really do that. He basically, I've titled today's episode, Mueller drops a turd in the 2020 punch bowl and exits stage left, which he essentially did, Scott. And what I meant by that title is that he's introduced these notions. We didn't exonerate the president. We didn't come to a conclusion. And this leaves this doubt in people's minds that clears the path for people like Gerald Nadler, Adam Schiff, to carry on with more of this stuff. Robert Mueller wasn't citing law. He wasn't even explaining the way the law is intended to work in the United States. He was just dropping little sort of crumbs for the Nadlers and the Schiffs to pick up and run with. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a very good, a very well said explanation, and you're right on the previous vaccine articulation too. That's exactly right. But skipping right to Mueller, well, what did he do? We saw him, and I watched him very carefully. He got up on stage and in a very monotone, heavy, serious,
nervous almost
way. yeah, he goes up and he doesn't say anything new. He regurgitates the general ideas behind his report, within his report, some of which are very false. They're flat out lies, I would say, and they're allegations. They used a tremendous amount of gymnastic language to get around things in
Lawyer speak.
devious way. Very, yeah, lawyer speak.
Yeah.
It ties things together in a very unnatural way when they start mentioning allegations versus facts. What do we know? And they don't get into what they don't know, and they don't talk about any other of the broad strokes of Hillary Clinton and Uranium One or the pay to play operations. They just focus on Mueller's allegations that the Russian government, Russian intelligence operatives, Russian military operatives, and Russian officers endeavored to create Facebook ads, create some sort of influence operation that would,
Right.
as you know, Jason, talk about Black Lives Matter or some of these other subject headlines that aren't usually Republican talking points. That's the influence of the campaign. And then he said the hacking of the DNC servers, which is, or Hillary, he said Hillary Clinton servers. And I thought that's not true. They didn't hack Hillary Clinton servers.
Well, he certainly
Hillary
hasn't
Clinton-
presented us with evidence of that. I would have found it a compelling press conference if he had stood up there and said, look, I'm going to cut through some of the speculation. I'm going to cut through some of the nonsense. Here's a detailed PowerPoint presentation on how we determined that Russians did X, Y, and Z. Instead, as you say, he came out there, he parroted the same our word versus theirs type of nonsense that there's been no proper investigation of. As you say, he hasn't investigated everything that was going on with Russia in terms of Uranium One. Buying YouTube, or rather Facebook ads, is that really a state actor influencing? I mean, isn't it true that we're not at war with Russia and Facebook is an open marketplace? Anybody can buy an ad there if they want to.
Yeah. Yeah, and there were some actual incorrect statements made on Fox News about this too, because one commentator had said the Facebook ads were $47,000.
$4,700 for Google.
That's right. That's right. 4,700, not 47,000. So some
Big
of these
difference.
idiots on Fox News are totally confused and out there, and that's why I get furious at this. We have to stick to the truth.
But
And
Scott, even if it was 47,000 on the scale of a government operation, that's not even enough to pay the people doing the paperwork.
Yeah, no, that's right. The money is not there. It was a stupid thing for them to even start trying to go down that path. And look, the broader psyop of this whole thing is, and why Mueller did this. I think it's a combination of Trump's counterattack. He's counterattacking. If we take things as we see them at face value, Trump is counterattacking with Barr. He's counterattacking with Durham. He's declassifying and disclosing everything. So everybody's phone number and bank account and address and wife and husband and secret lover and all this stuff is going to be made public to a certain extent, within certain legal protections of people's privacy and social security numbers and stuff. But he's going to declassify everything, as he should. $35-40 million to wasted doing this sort of nonsense that we knew was all fraudulent and a psyop in the first place. So Mueller is responding. I listened to some news reports this morning, and they were also reconfirming that the CIA spies that were used, that were allegedly close to Putin, all of that is going to be declassified. And the New York Times has released a story to get ahead of that person. I wouldn't be surprised, Jason, if they also released some of the journalists that were tied to a lot of these secret intelligence. And I know personally Michael Isikoff and Tom Hamburger are embedded in CIA operations, so I'd like to see them exposed. And then you start to really see the dots begin to connect, and that's where we're going. We're going to see the dots connect. The Democrats are, of course, responding like that classic biblical story of the prophets of Baal flagellating themselves and screaming in the air and throwing themselves on the ground, trying to wake up their God to burn the altar or whatever. And I think it was Jeremiah who let them, and he let them pant and destroy themselves and exhaust themselves, and then he called down fire from heaven. I think the Democrats are behaving in this prophet of Baal madness. They're absolutely going apoplectic, and they know the time is running out because the American people are going to say, "Is that all you have? Just emotional vitriol and emotional fury and hatred for the president? You've had that for 2 years." But you've been engaging in the government systems and agencies and personnel to do a total scam job. There was no Russian collusion. Trump didn't work with them. That all of that was a lie. So all of these things are going to be declassified. They're going to be made public. Barr and Durham are probably going to indict and prosecute some of these people. I think that it could include Christopher Steele, the British agent who was paid by all these people to start this. It was a Republican first. John McCain was involved. Yeah. They were all involved with this thing. And then you go to the government collusion. John Brennan is really going to be the one to hang. And we reported Brennan in 2012. As you know, in Shell Game, we reported all of these people, part of the Clinton terrorist financing Shell Game with the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Morocco, the Union Bank of Switzerland. And these same people, these same characters who we reported in 2012 have been popping up all over since. John Brennan, Hillary Clinton, Stuart Eisenstadt at Covington and Burling, Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer, previously at Covington and Burling, then the Department of Justice, now back to Covington and Burling. All of these things I think are coming out, Jason, and I think that's why we're going to witness a major backlash of desperation and hysterics by the Democrats, because that's how they play. That's their only option. Yeah. They have to fight with emotional. We just saw a second person light himself on fire in front of the White House.
That was amazing.
I said a year ago this was happening. They're going to do that. They're going to increasingly do public suicide.
What do we know about that guy, Scott? What was that all about? It's dramatic photos, but it seems like he's wearing some sort of a stuntman outfit because he's got fire retardant material. You cannot run around while you're on fire like that unless you're a stuntman who's got the flame retardant suit like what they would have in a special effects setup on a movie. The guy's not dead, but he was running around on fire, billowing smoke. What's up with this?
I don't know what's up with that. It's very bizarre. Is it a false flag? Is it an
Orange USA? I mean, this is obviously anything orange is obviously poking fun at Donald Trump. I do agree the facial makeup that he wears every day does not look natural. I wish he would stop doing that. But I want to also remind people, Scott, you're pointing out all these things that you've revealed in your book, Shell Game. People should be going to shellgamewhistleblower.com. And if you haven't already read Scott's book, now is the time. It's more important than ever that people see the revelations that Scott brought to the attention of a lot of these Democrats, even Republicans, people who are in Congress. And I agree with what you're saying right now, Scott. I think we're seeing an unprecedented level of deceit, of lying, of, oh, someone's saying that guy who set himself on fire is dead, covered with Vaseline. Well, the Vaseline is used to prevent the fire from spreading. Like in a movie, if somebody is to be set on fire like this, they'd wear a flame retardant suit, and if their hands or something are intended to be visible, they'll put Vaseline at the edges, because it's my understanding that's where it stops the fire from proceeding. But I want to go back to Mueller, because all the people that you're talking about as you're speaking, it really illustrates for everybody how many people are involved in this. Robert Mueller himself does not want a broad investigation of the DOJ because people might examine his motivations for conducting this investigation, why he carried on after more than a year. People say he knew over a year ago that there was no crime. And I want to put this idea in people's heads. Scott, if somebody called the local police department and said, hey, Scott Bennett is running some kind of a criminal operation out of his house, let's say they crafted some story that was sufficient to get the police to go over there. They conduct an investigation. they turn your house upside down, they interrogate me, they interrogate other people that are your associates or do business with you. They even indict somebody who's done business with you in the past over something unrelated, investigate you for 2 years, and they are unable to find sufficient evidence to convict you of a crime. This does not require the police to exonerate you. I actually specifically looked up the word exonerate, and exoneration is like when you're sitting in jail playing bocce with Brad Birkenfeld. If someone came along and said, hey, we've realized that David Shalala did X, Y, and Z, prevented to show this, refused, I should say, or was somehow prevented from showing this exculpatory evidence. Here's exculpatory evidence, proves that Scott is innocent. Now you're exonerated, they take you out of jail. What they found in the case of President Trump was no evidence of a crime, and therefore he is innocent because he wasn't proven guilty. This is an assault on the Constitution, not to do with the presidency, but to do with each of our rights to be innocent, presumed innocent until proven guilty, not presumed guilty until we can find something.
Yeah, that's a very brilliant observation and perspective, because is that not what we began to see the genesis of immediately after the 9/11 attacks? Was suddenly everyone was a suspected terrorist. Everyone could be pulled over.
Except Robert Mueller.
Except Robert Mueller, who incidentally was going around collecting the videotapes of the nearby shops at the Pentagon to hide the fact that there was no plane that hit the Pentagon, which I can confirm because I drove by the Pentagon the following day on my way up to Catholic University, driving by George Washington Parkway, looked to my right and saw a big blue tarp on the corner of the building. There was no skid marks, there was no plane marks, there were no debris, there was nothing. It was a pristine golf course. It was a putting course. It was so perfectly groomed and greened and grassed.
Wow.
There was no plane that hit the Pentagon. So that you're right on another level, besides the fact that was all seeded 20 years ago, 19 years ago, to have the social engineering, as you've wisely observed, to begin to be conducted against Americans, starting in 9/11. And now we're seeing the climax of it. Julian Assange, who we'll get into later, is also a victim of that. He was an attempt to overthrow that, and the American people, I think, embraced him for it. But this social engineering that Mueller was involved with, what we see going down now with regards to you're innocent. Americans are innocent. Americans have constitutional rights. Those are inviolable. Those are not up for debate. Those are inviolable rights given to man by God, and the founding fathers simply enshrined them on the documentation and the government law of the land. No one can suspend them, and if you do, then you file and you fight in court and say this was totally wrong. But they've started to get away with this for so long that I think they recognize and they feel the momentum shifting back. I think the alternative media, and I think shows such as yours, Jason, and many others have awoken a lot of these deep state operatives and these power fascists to the reality that there's a young generation under the age of 60 or 55 who are mad as hell and aren't going to take it anymore, who are on the internet and telling those exact words, and they've got some eyes of daggers for Robert Mueller. And that includes Republicans. I think what we should see is Robert Mueller dragged in front of the Senate and the Congress and asked the questions like you said. Mr. Mueller, why did you hire Ginny Reed, the Clinton Foundation lawyer who knew about the play-to-play operations, who knew about Covington and Burling, who was part of those conversations, who knew about Brad Birkenfeld, who knew about the Swiss government? Why did you hire Ginny Reed to be part of your investigation? Why did you hire all these Democrats? I think Mueller would be pounded into dust by the conservative, libertarian, truthful people, and the Democrats would just be continuing to stick themselves like bloody pigs and scream all sorts of nonsense. But you have people like Jordan or Gates or really experienced prosecutorial questioners, and they'll get right in the heart at Mueller, and all he can say is, well, I'm not going to answer that. I submitted it in the report. Well, I'm sorry, that's not good enough, Mr. Mueller, because you've hired all these people. And like you said, when did you know there was no Russian collusion? When did you know there's other possibilities of explaining this, such as Bill Binney, who was talking with Pompeo and said that there was no DNC hacking from a foreign entity across the sea. There was someone most likely putting in a zip drive or some thumb drive and downloading the material and then transferring it by person.
Well,
How come
Scott,
that was never done?
how about a lawyerly question to Robert Mueller, like why didn't you have the FBI conduct an investigation of the server? Why was it just given to this third-party private company of which a former FBI agent is one of the founders, and someone who's got a real problem with Russia is the chief technology officer? Why is the FBI not investigating this? Like, none of this. He's doing a great job, Robert Mueller, that is, of putting forward these elements of the investigation that he wants people to focus on, while specifically not addressing these other elements. You know, last week, Kevin Shipp apparently accurately predicted that Robert Mueller would not testify before Congress. Kevin will be back tonight at 7 p.m. Oh, sorry, last week, our show was dark. Kevin hurt himself. He'll be back tonight, and we'll talk more about Robert Mueller. But it's very interesting how this whole thing is playing out very much in the public. But I don't think Robert Mueller was being truthful with us yesterday. I think he was planting things he wants the Democrats to run with, and they are going to.
Yeah, I think I love Kevin Shipp. I mean, I love Kevin Shipp because I think his background of the CIA and his knowledge. Of course, we knew him back in Operation Classified with John B. Wells in Dallas. I think he's got great assessments. I think others like Sidney Powell and others, they're all coming in to sort of expose this and talk about this. We're witnessing the counter strike. We're witnessing, the tide going back out, and all of this is going to be revealed. It has to be done in a very cool, calculated manner, dispassionately, because all the emotions of the Democrats, that's all they have is emotion and vitriol and madness and illogic. I mean, we're witnessing something that's very difficult for a lot of people to get their heads around, and that is the complete mental breakdown of the Democrat Party and their exposure of fraud and lying and corruption. This was a coup d'etat. And the other thing that I think is going to happen, besides a lot of these testimonies, and I'm giving a speech tonight in San Francisco about a lot of this stuff and where Shell Game fits in, and Brad Birkenfeld and Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, and all of these people need to testify because the American people need to know this. They need to know Dianne Feinstein covered all of this up as chairwoman of the Intelligence Committee.
Right.
So I think it's coming that way. The president knows it. But I think the deep state are trying to push him into some of these fights, too, whether it's with Iran or Russia and elsewhere. I don't think he's going that way anymore. I don't think he ever was, but I think he's now saying it publicly when he says
doesn't want a war. Yeah.
He doesn't want a war. He's not.
That was encouraging, wasn't it?
It was because it calms down everybody else. It calms down the Iranians, who need to be calmed down. They're already all fluffered and all this other stuff and full of pride. But he's sort of saying, I'm not in a hurry with North Korea. So that calms everything down. The other thing, of course, is Julian Assange and his, I'd like to think Julian Assange is already over in the United States and secreted away and is going to be given some testimony, or has been, or has already been pardoned or something. I'd like to think Julian Assange.
I don't think that's happening, though.
But if it's not, we're witnessing what should be a trigger to a major civil war, not only in Britain but in the United States. Because if the
jailing of Assange, you mean?
Well, the potential killing and poisoning of Assange. It's coming out now that allegedly he's having difficulty breathing. He's not able to respond.
Yes.
So they may have poisoned him. I got calls yesterday about his potential poisoning. Wow. If they have done this, if they have poisoned Assange, if they are killing him or trying to kill him, or if he does get killed, what that does, Jason, as you kind of talked about a little bit earlier, this is the death of the freedom of speech, the journalism, the freedom to expose government corruption, government crimes. That's what Julian Assange did. He published truthful documents. He didn't publish innuendo. He didn't publish, and it wasn't just him, but he's sort of the spokesman for it. But he published documents that Americans and other people brought to expose wrongdoing. Yes, there were some things that were problematic, like helicopters shooting up Iraqis or journalists in war. That's what happens in war. But what he really disclosed that I admire were the WikiLeaks cables that disclosed the corruption of government. The Hillary Clinton Foundation, Snowden did a lot of the same thing, but for Julian Assange to be poisoned or killed, if that's going on, every American and every person in Western civilization, you see them in Bangladesh. Actually, you see them holding up signs. I cannot say we have any honor left if we do not take to the streets in some capacity and say, now you've proven we are in civil war, because now you're proving we are slaves to a government tyranny, police state, oligarchy, news media, fascist state. I mean, it's right out of Mockingjay or whatever. Sorry, that's not what we as American citizens are going to live under. That's not what British people should live under. That's what I think in my heart. This is what murdering Assange does. It murders our freedom of speech. It murders our freedom, and it murders any integrity that we once had. Only through, I think, really, if that happens, if he dies, I think only through a real violent uprising can this ever be rectified, because he was the standard bearer of whistleblowing, of truth, of getting it out. And it's not him. It's not Julian Assange. It's what he stood for. It's what he did. And it's how they treat him. They treat all of us. And this may be the bridge too far.
Well, let's talk about this for a moment, Scott, because this has just come out a little while ago. WikiLeaks has made an announcement here via Twitter saying that WikiLeaks has grave concerns about the state of health of our publisher, Julian Assange, who has been moved to the health ward of Belmarsh Prison. Mr. Assange's health had already significantly deteriorated after 7 years inside the Ecuadorian embassy under conditions that were incompatible with basic human rights. The United Nations twice found him to have been arbitrarily detained and called on the United Kingdom to honor its commitments under international law and to free him. You know, Scott, you and I are about the same age. I remember growing up in the 80s, we had all these movies about how terrible the Soviet Union was. There was one, I forget the actor, but he was in a gulag. Maybe it was Mikhail, that ballet dancer guy. He's in a gulag, and they spoke about how they just imprison people arbitrarily. Isn't that exactly what's happening to Julian Assange? And if they've done something to kill him inside the prison, I mean, you've told us about how you were railroaded and stuck in what sounds like a far less terrible prison than Belmarsh. It would have been pretty easy for somebody to do something harmful to you in there without the usual protections that we have out here in the civilian world, right?
Look, that's exactly right. He's subject to they could sprinkle poison on his food as they slide it through the door. He's in solitary confinement. He doesn't get outside. They can spray something in the cell as they walk by. It's very easy to kill people. They can medicate him. They can over medicate him. I saw guys die in the prison that I was at. I saw guys hang themselves. I saw guys die because the medical practitioners who are Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, they have no business practicing medicine, prescribed pills and medication for guys that destroy their liver or are inaccurately assessed,
right?
And guys just get wheeled out on wheelchairs.
And nobody can question. This is what the doctor says. Oh, the guy died. His health deteriorated for years, and then he died.
I saw a guy die. He was a millionaire, multimillionaire. He was in his early 50s. He was very wealthy. He couldn't handle the stress of what was going on. I mean, it's a terrible, stressful environment, especially if you haven't been in the military, you've been through stress, you really can freak out. I saw a guy die. He died in his cell of a massive stroke and heart attack because they were giving him the wrong medication. They wheeled him out and then put him on tarmac outside the prison so they could pretend to give him CPR so the prison wouldn't be liable or investigated. He was already dead because he had the black and blue blood settling stains on his flesh and arms and legs. So he was dead. They wheeled him out. They pretended to give him, they didn't give him mouth to mouth. They gave him, with the oxygen thing.
Do you think Assange will survive, Scott? This seems like they're killing him.
I would like to think so, but I honestly don't think he will. If he's in the British prison is worse than the American. They have no heart and soul. You're talking about one of the most corrupt entities, one of the big enemies of the United States too. It saddens me to say this because I mean, originally spawned from Scotland and I've got relatives and family out there, but it's a different Britain now than what it was when my family were all there. Now you've got a pedophile madness, no, non-religious. There's nothing there anymore. It's an empty shell, and they've also been going around disturbing the rest of the world. They were part under Tony Blair and Cameron and all these clowns for Libya and Syria and Afghanistan and Iraq and all this stuff. John Bolton, of course, too. We've seen the British walking around destroying the world as the United States has. So I could see them without even wincing killing Assange. They put him in jail for 50 weeks in the top penitentiary prison. He should have been put into a low or home confinement or something. But I'll say this, Jason, the President of the United States of America should demand that Julian Assange be immediately released, demand that he brought over to the United States and testify about all of this material, starting with Shell Game and the WikiLeaks cables that he brought over and gave to Brad Birkenfeld, that disclosed Hillary Clinton's pay-to-play operations between these Middle Eastern countries and Swiss banks. That's what Julian Assange can testify, among many other things. And the president, shame on him if he does not give Julian Assange that opportunity to tell the American public the lies and the corruption that he reported and saw in the WikiLeaks cables. He can be given him a full pardon, or he can commute a sentence or whatever it is and just say, tell me what you know. You know, if you don't want to tell me some things, that's fine. But tell me what you know that we can drill down and find out what crimes have been committed. Did you get this from the Russians or not? And Julian Assange has already said to Sean Hannity when he interviewed him, the Russians were not our source. He didn't say Seth Rich, but they did open up a reward for the death of Seth Rich, and many others have already.
I think he did that to challenge the Seth Rich narrative. We have not seen any evidence that Seth Rich was actually murdered. In fact, there are many contradictions. We've heard Rod Wheeler say the police did not call for a lookout. There is no body camera footage despite 5 officers responding. There has been no death certificate, no autopsy, no ballistics report. Rod Wheeler told us none of that ever happens. I feel like Julian Assange speaks very indirectly in that he put forward that reward not because Seth Rich was the source, but because he was challenging potentially a John Podesta or Media Matters or somebody like that created story about Seth Rich. But let's stay focused on Assange. Donald Trump is really failing us as the people of America by not stepping in and demanding, particularly now under these health concerns, that Assange be taken out of that prison. And I mean, look, they've indicted him now on espionage, which does not bode well for the American position and Donald Trump administration position on Julian Assange. This seems like the news story that they can put out to be the lead up to, oh, whoops.
You know, I was reviewing a lot of the speeches and a lot of the presentations and newscasts that I did on Press TV and RT and others when Trump was, before he was elected and immediately on Inauguration Day. And I was very optimistic, and I was saying he's not going to go in, he's going to get us out of the foreign wars. He's going to get us into a better position with Russia and friendlier position. He's going to stop this military industrial complex that's going around the world, destroying the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I have to eat a lot of those words, and I look like a fool now when I think about it, even though, you know, some of it's true. And I know all the deep state calculations, and he couldn't do it because they would have said he's a Russian spy and on and on. But I still have to come back to the things I said at the time on my hopeful optimism that Trump would challenge and overthrow the military-industrial complex and not wage war on Russia or Iran. All of that has been proven lies and failings because he did allow everything that happens in the world in foreign policy is on Trump's page. It's his signature. The blood is on his hands. And he did allow Venezuela. He did allow this Syrian staying and the troops over there. He did fire Tomahawk missiles into Syria. He has continued sanctions against Russia, and he did follow through with the confiscation of properties after Obama started it in December of 2016. Trump has gone the different direction that he said he was going to. I don't care why. I don't care. I just care about the facts. And he's deviated. And that deviation could cost him the presidency, because the outrage that I feel looking back on the original testimony that I gave and press TV interviews saying all of these things that I hope this is going to happen, all of that, not all of it, a lot of good has come, and I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, and he's better than Hillary. But I still can't help but feel disappointed by these failures, which shouldn't have been failures. And they were not only just Hillary Clinton. This was symptomatic of a society after 9/11, which has been devolving into a police state, military industrial complex, social engineering, mainstream media, as you well said. And that is what we rebel against. That's what we shrug off. That's what we refuse to kowtow to. That's why we spread truth. Facebook shut my page down for 30 days, so I can't respond on Facebook. YouTube shut me down because of the things we exposed, and the New Zealand shooting is false. So we're wrestling against these alternative media, things like YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. But Trump has failed in many regards, and he better get back on the horse, or he's going to lose this to Tulsi Gabbard. I could already see her pulling ahead. Now, if Julian Assange dies, the blood is on Trump's hands.
That will
Trump
be very
is responsible. Bad. He is responsible for the death of Julian Assange, Donald Trump, because it's his opportunity and it's his obligation as commander-in-chief to go over there and get an intelligence asset, arrest him out of the hands of the British, and say, you, British, I don't trust as far as I could throw you.
Yeah, you'd think he would do that based on this whole Christopher Steele dust up. And I mean, why would he allow Assange to stay in the hands of the British? I want to clarify, Scott, because we've got a lot of people in the comments who are saying they disagree. Look, I'm not denouncing President Trump. I still overall feel positive about Trump. Very glad that Hillary Clinton did not become president, but it's a problematic situation when we have this binary choice and such an array of complex issues that those individuals need to be dealing with in their job. As far as the social media suppression goes, I just want to thank you for reminding me that I want everybody to know that they can also find Scott Bennett on Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/shellgame, Scott is regularly posting lots of videos, including the shows we do together and other materials. So get onto patreon.com/shellgame and support Scott. People can also support this broadcast by going to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Now, Scott, I'm a little concerned about Tulsi Gabbard. I just don't think that the Democrat establishment is going to allow her. They're pushing Joe Biden. That's quite clear. Another guy who's got a dog in this race as far as covering up the corruption. And although I will be devastatingly disappointed in President Trump, right now, he needs to act like today and get Julian Assange out of there, get him into a hospital, get him out of control of a prison hospital, get him out of control of England. But I just don't feel like he's going to do that. However, that won't make me vote for Joe Biden.
Right. I agree. No, I agree with that. We're pointing out things that he should do, that we as Americans who love truth and freedom and all of this and hate this corruption and this police state of fear that has enveloped us. We're tearing and gnashing at this thing with ferocity, and we're looking at opportunities for Trump to act as commander in chief and do good things. It's not going to be a deal breaker if he doesn't, but it will be a shame. It'll be a failed maneuver that he could do. Look, this is a chess game. This is not, a dance-a-thon. This is not your, ballroom dancing. This is
it a chess game or a poker game, Scott?
Yeah, I'd say it's a chess game because it's law. It's law, and you can only do certain moves in law. And military and intelligence and such like that are bound by the Constitution and law. So Trump can send military guys over there to meet with Assange. He can send Department of Justice people. He should send military people. He should send a core Praetorian Guard over to Britain to say, we want him moved over to our base We want an American military official standing outside Assange's door on a daily basis. That's
Yeah.
that's that's the assignment that should take place. He should be a protected asset that has a very important national security and intelligence information that needs to be protected by the United States military. Period. And if Trump doesn't do that, he's failing, because if Julian Assange dies, everything dies with him. Yes, there's a lot of stuff that
Freedom of
is still
speech
out there
dies with him.
buried, but Julian Assange, love him or not, can testify about certain things and set the record straight and clear. And the Democrats don't want it, and some Republicans don't want it, but truth-seeking Americans do want it. I think the Rand Pauls and others would want it. Trump has said, I love WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks gave Trump the election, I think.
Yeah. That's troubling as well, how he's backed away from those comments.
Well, again, it's upsetting because it's an act of hypocrisy. He's not doing what he said he was going to do, and he's not being as forceful and bold in attacking the deep state as he promised he was going to do. He's now become sort of manipulated by Bolton. Look, we don't have to get pretty and polite about this. What the hell is he doing with John Bolton, one of the most hated men in America, as his national security advisor?
Wanted to ask you about that. There's this article just a few hours ago in the Washington Post, which of course I don't believe, but it says bye-bye Bolton, ? Now this is perspective, so I guess it's an opinion piece, but it's talking about how the president is disenchanted with his national security advisor again, as a separate sentence there. So obviously they're trying to position this as some sort of failing with Donald Trump, constantly becoming unhappy with his national security advisors, but it could just be that he is keeping his enemies closer. John Bolton, you and I both agree, is an absolutely terrible guy who we would all be better off if he were kicked out of the government for the rest of time. We're talking about, someone was in the comments here earlier questioning something that you had said about Trump's actions in Venezuela. I agree. I think we'd be better off not trying to overthrow the government of Venezuela. What do we think about this article that is speculating about the departure of John Bolton?
Well, I hope it's true. He certainly does need to be departed. I think some of the best people I've seen to replace him that Trump can use. There's a General McGregor that you've probably seen on Tucker Carlson a few times, and I like him a lot. I think he's one of the few men who speaks like we speak, which is non-intervention. Iran is not an enemy looking to invade Florida or go to war with us. Neither is Russia, and we're not benefiting from these endless wars. This is coming from General, I think his name's Douglas McGregor, but he's one of the few that has stood up against the military-industrial complex. He's like what's his name, Smedley Butler type, and of course Dick Black. Dick Black is a great American too. Dick Black. Do we need to go back? Let's do a quick recap. Dick Black and Andrew McCabe have history. Andrew McCabe, the FBI director, was married to Jill McCabe, and they were trying to get Jill McCabe to take over Dick Black's Senate seat. They were trying to kick Dick Black out. They were trying to get him assassinated.
It's so insidious.
Andrew McCabe sending 4 FBI agents to Dick Black's office to try and get him to go over to Syria and do some sort of terrorist negotiation, because they were going to kill him over there. And then they were going to slip in Jill McCabe. That happened. That needs to be part of the Mueller investigation. Oh, wait a minute, it wasn't.
Right.
And that should be part of the congressional exploitation of this, to say, why did you send 4 FBI agents to try and get Dick Black to go over to Syria, Mr. McCabe? Was it because you wanted to kill him so that your wife, Jill McCabe, could slip into his seat? Why didn't you like Dick Black? Oh, because he was over there briefing and trying to do intelligence assessments with Syria, because he's been on Russia Today, he's been on Russia TV, he's been on Iranian TV, and they all like him? Wouldn't that be a great national security advisor for the president, someone he likes, maybe even Secretary of State? I think Dick Black's a great guy, and he's got the credentials for it. So Trump needs to have better people replacing these clowns and these neocon fascists. And the problem is, Jason, he's been having these people for 2 years, and they've done a lot of damage. They've damaged his reputation. And I know that a lot of people will say, well, he had to, because the Republicans and the establishment and the Mitch McConnells and all these guys we're one breath away from impeaching him because they would have said he's a Russian agent and
Right.
we're going to impeach him for it. That's a very real possibility. That's the poker game, like you're saying. Hey, they do have that hand, and they do, if they throw it down, they beat me as the president because if both houses say I'm a Russian agent, even though it's a flat out lie, technically, I'm out. Now
Right.
they can't do that because
Yeah.
everything has been exposed as false.
And I think some
But
people in the chat are misunderstanding what we're saying. We like Dick Black. We're saying that Andrew McCabe and the FBI did not like Dick Black because Dick
right,
Black wanted to. I mean, here's what you got to understand. If I go to Syria and I put out a YouTube video that says, hey, wait a minute, everything we've heard is wrong, that's not the same as if a sitting senator, even though he's only a state senator, this is a guy who holds much more clout than I do, certainly. He's a military veteran. He's a state senator. The notion that a guy like this could run for Senate or some other higher office is very real. And I think that if he were assassinated in Syria, nobody would look twice at a news report that says, oh, U.S. politician assassinated in Syria. In fact, they would have used that as a lever to go and attack in Syria some more. So I don't want people to think that we presume that some sort of political squabble between Andrew McCabe and Dick Black caused him to do this.
no,
They just wanted his wife in there so that she could take over the office and run it the way
right.
they wanted it run.
Yeah. Dick Black smelled a trap, and his staff told him, "Sir, there's something fishy that they're trying to get you to do." And he contacted the FBI, and he said, "Wait a minute, you're telling me to go over and talk to a terrorist group?" And McCabe and the FBI said, "Oh no," they tried to do the Jedi mind trick. "Oh no, 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 that's not the terrorist group you're thinking about."
But wait,
that's a good.
That is social engineering, not the Jedi mind trick. They're trying to convince him to do something that is actually against his own best interest. And they know it is. They're not giving him bad advice. They're using social engineering tactics to trick him into doing something. We see a lot of that happening. There's someone out there that's trying to get me to release some text logs of texts that we had together. Now that person already has the texts. So if actually releasing the information was that person's goal, they would just do it. But they're trying to manipulate me to do something, and this is a clear indication of social engineering. Now, what this person's true purpose is, don't yet know, but it seems quite obviously to be something against my best interest. Get us away from major topics like Julian Assange, the 2020 election, the pending impeachment of Donald Trump on false allegations. They don't want me having important guests like you on, people who are retired Army second lieutenants who have written books about illegal terrorist financing, such as Shell Game, a book that everybody should go to shellgamewhistleblower.com and buy. They don't want me talking about important stuff like that, Scott. They want me wasting time with their petty nonsense and releasing texts of personal squabbles. This is social engineering. Just like Robert Mueller doesn't want to get to the actual answers, he doesn't want to reveal the truth. He doesn't want us to know that he spent $25 million on the most expensive nothing burger anybody's ever ordered while he ran up the bar bill and trampled on. He's using the Constitution as a cocktail napkin, basically. Doesn't care about the law, doesn't care about what's right. He just wants to protect, I think, himself, because if Donald Trump lived up to his campaign promises, in addition to pardoning Julian Assange and stopping these foreign wars, he would tell us who was actually involved in 9/11. And I suspect that Robert Mueller knows a lot more than he's told us about that, and that he's in a precarious position.
I think you're right too, and other lawyers would probably, I say other lawyers, but lawyers that like Larry Klayman and others would probably be able to articulate better that the potential for a full dismissal of cases against people like Manafort, Roger Stone, Jeremy Jeremy the other guy,
Jerome Corsi.
Jerome Corsi, thank you. But Manafort really is a case of fruit of the poisonous tree. And as such, Manafort's cases against him and the investigations against him for all of the financial activities were not part of the Russian probe. And oh, wait a minute, the Russian probe was based on FISA warrants that were based on a combination of Fusion GPS, CrowdStrike, the Democrat National Committee, Hillary Clinton, Christopher Steele, paid operatives, Bruce Orr, Nellie Orr, all of Glenn Simpson, all of these clowns. And I would recommend people go get Epoch Times and the Spygate thing they lay out.
Oh,
They have a
yeah.
whole schematic, and I've read it. They miss some key parts, but they get most of it. But all of that was the false tree, the fruit of the poisonous tree that led to the Manafort prosecution. All of that should be dismissed. The court, the Supreme Court, if anything, should say your entire investigation with Paul Manafort was based on a lie and a fraud to the court. The FISA warrants and all the stuff were based
He
on
should
lies
be
and
exonerated.
well, absolutely, and everything thrown out against Manafort, saying you can't prosecute a man for taxes or anything else because you didn't have a right to investigate him in the first place.
Right.
You investigated Russian ties, not his financial life. You weren't authorized to do that, and plus your Russian ties in all of this were based on lies. It was based on you're abusing the systems and the processes of government like you know how to do, and you used it to your advantage and your political disadvantage of Donald Trump. This was a coup d'etat. This is treason, and this will be prosecuted in a court of law as such. You are being charged with treason. You're being charged with an attempted coup and all sorts of other things. That's how they really get this serious, because this is not going to go away unless these people are crushed and destroyed and thrown in prison without mercy. Because if Donald Trump loses the 2020 election, if the Democrats get back in power, God forbid, if God turns away and ultimately curses and shuns this country by turning us over to the wicked, when the wicked rule, the people mourn. When the righteous rule, the people rejoice. Well, if the wicked Democrats get in there and gain control, this country now becomes an absolute police state. It becomes a tyranny, an abusive, fascistic. I can't even describe what kind of a country this would be, because this is not Barack Obama's America. This is now an America where we're witnessing these lunatic, vicious Antifa, anti-Kavanaugh protests, people defecating in the streets, burning cars, beating up Trump supporters, all this stuff. It will be civil war. It will be civil war. I think we're going that way already. I think we're already in a civil war. I think
It's an information civil war. It's kind of a cold civil war. Now, Scott, we've got JPP in the comments here on YouTube saying that they think perhaps you have an unrealistic expectation about what Trump can reasonably accomplish in such a hostile position. Maybe that's correct. Is he aligning himself with some of these people to try to double cross or figure out what they, I mean, it's difficult. Nothing happening here is straightforward, right?
Right. Well, to a certain degree, he's right. He is limited. But to another degree, Trump can do a lot through putting people in positions who are ass kickers, who are fighters, who are just looking for faces to smash into, who are looking to go into agencies and say, all of you are done. You're out. You're working in the basement sharpening pencils. I don't give a shit what you're a GS 13, 14, 15. You're out. You, General, you're out. You're out. Captains, I want you in these positions. You have to have people in there as your Praetorian Guard, political appointees, that go into all of the agencies and all of the military and turn it upside down, totally recalibrate everything to advance and serve his agenda. Oh, people aren't being appointed? Well, then I'm appointing people temporarily. There's no office that should be empty, and every office should be staffed by an ass-kicking, hard-charging, bold Trump ideologue, someone that totally supports him. And I'd say that of course embraces the classical Republican principles of less government interference, low taxes, family values, and no wars being propagated all over the place like we've been doing for 19 years. That's what got him elected. And you can do other things. I mean, he should have who's Candace Owens, the young black girl who's a brilliant speaker. I love her. I'd
Yeah.
love to see her brought into a national position of the president, whatever it is. I'd like to see some younger people brought
Right.
in who aren't poisoned with the prejudices of these old bitter men like Bolton and these scarred personalities. I want people coming in who love the country and want hope and want to push us in the right direction. He's got to delegate that. He's got to bring in very strong-minded people, and he can do a tremendous amount.
I
And he
think,
needs to go on the full attack of the media.
yeah.
Right now, Fox News is the only one that's doing some good, but he needs to amplify that. You know, this is an information war, Jason. So all elements of information war Trump needs to do. He's a great fighter by himself. He is Maximus the Gladiator. Nobody can beat him when he's in the arena. When his back's against the wall, Trump is a great communicator. He's raw and he's honest. But you know, they're dogpiling on him,
Right.
and the big thing he needs to do also is get Julian Assange. Julian Assange would be a major distraction for the Democrats. The psyop potential of Julian Assange? Well, I've met with Mr. Assange, and he has told me some things that the American public need to know, and that would be
You
brilliant.
mean
More
if
people
Trump
are on
were
his
to
side.
say that? You mean if Trump
Yes.
were to say that, it would be perfect?
Yeah.
I agree. I think a lot of people are very concerned, Scott. We just have a few minutes left, but people, I think, are very concerned about, you know, Jared Kushner and his close relationship with the Saudi prince and the
Yeah.
sale of arms to the Saudis, the United States' close relationship with Saudi Arabia in general. It's just come out that Mike Pompeo and Jared Kushner are both going to this Bilderberg meeting, which, again, this is another thing I would prefer to have Donald Trump call out and denounce. Why? Bilderberg is not a country. It's not the UN. What the hell is this thing, and how does it operate in any of our best interests?
It
The other
doesn't.
thing I wanted to pose to you rather, is we've heard, of course, last week Donald Trump announce his new mandate that he's given to William Barr to declassify anything and everything pertaining to this Russia investigation. What do you make of this Bilderberg meeting, and what do you think is going to happen with the declassification, just in our last few minutes here?
Well, declassification needs to happen, and it needs to be done immediately, and it gives the American public the material to read and see what happened. I think it will happen. He needs to really be aggressive and have hearings and talk from now till 2020. This is his milking operation. Bilderberg, we know it's all bad. All these people are bad. We know it's totally corrupt. Why Jared Kushner's going there? It's because he's got some bad, corrupt elements in him. I think nobody voted for Jared Kushner, and I really
Right.
don't think anybody likes him in this country. So he needs to be kicked out. He needs to go. He needs to go with his wife and live somewhere, do his own thing, but get Jared Kushner the hell out of government, because the American people put Trump in office to help and protect them from this tyranny of Clinton and all of the deep state and the wars for 19 years. They put Trump in there. They didn't put Jared Kushner. Nobody likes the Saudis, and nobody likes these wars. So Kushner needs to be ushered out. Trump needs a new varsity team.
Well, who is it? We've got someone in the comments here saying that we should watch what happens afterwards. This is Eric is asking, could it be that Trump is sending a message to the Bilderbergers and we should watch what happens afterwards? I mean, that's interesting. If someone was to dive into the belly of the beast and sort of set off a grenade from inside there, I guess when you see him diving in, you'd think, "Oh no, there he goes." So we don't really know.
It's like Eyes Wide Shut. So Kushner's going in like Tom Cruise to Eyes Wide Shut, with who knows what's going on there. Yeah, keep your enemies close, right? So if I was in Trump's shoes, I would go to the Bilderberger group. I'd go to all these groups. I'd wear their little masks and swing their incense, and I would probably abstain from some of the fornicating pedophilia they may indulge in. But I would certainly go inside and figure out who's who and what's going on. And oh, there's Prince Charles. Oh, there's Henry Kissinger being wheeled in on a hospital bed. Oh, here's all the other guys, and find out and give an intelligence report to Trump. This is a time where Trump needs to upturn all of the agencies, the CIA, the FBI, the State Department, Even in the military, we've got some rank pieces of garbage traitors in the military that should be the first ones that are executed for treason because of what they did at the Pentagon on 9/11. Now, Trump either moves in a way that doesn't get him the Kennedy destiny. We don't want anything to happen to him, but he has to also go in a very bold, make America great again, make it new again. And that means cleaning off the scabs and the leprosies and the diseases that these parasitic bureaucrat establishment, deep state, Democrat and Republican types have infected the bloodstream of America for the last 25, 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a complicated problem for him to solve and hard for us to know what's happening. He has done, I think, a good job of navigating the treacherous waters of this Mueller investigation, and he's come out on the other side in a good position, so we'll have to wait and see. I want to remind everyone that they can purchase the book Shell Game, and they can get it by going to shellgamewhistleblower.com. That is Scott's website, and if you've already got the book, you can support Scott financially. He's got a donate button here on the webpage, and through PayPal or with your credit card, you can send him some money that way. You can also get onto patreon.com/shellgame. That is Scott's Patreon page, and you can become a monthly sponsor of Scott by going there. You can find out all about his wrongful imprisonment and how that led him to Brad Birkenfeld, who was the Swiss bank whistleblower, helped Scott learn all the details of illegal terrorist financing that are detailed in his book. I hope that people will also support this broadcast by going to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We've got another episode of the intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp coming up tonight at 7. Kevin had a minor injury that put him in the hospital last week. He's totally okay. He's out. He's going to be back tonight. People can see that show on Patreon. Scott, thanks so much for these insights. We're all going to keep our eyes on Robert Mueller. He's a slippery dude, and we'll have to see what happens with this Bilderberg meeting, Donald Trump, the 2020 election. We'll have you back next week for some more conversation. Thank you so much, Scott. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Thanks, brother, and pray for Julian Assange. Pray
Absolutely.
for his health.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody.